This woman is in a wheelchair and needs help going up the sidewalk. This first man says that he's late for a job interview and that's why he won't be able to help her. Minutes later, she reveals to another man that she is late for a job interview at that company and he, who is also looking for a job at that place, decides not to help her. Some time ago, this businesswoman asked her secretary if she was able to choose good resumes for the selection that will soon take place. The employee takes some resumes and gives them to the boss and says that this time, all the competitors are very qualified. The businesswoman begins to check the resumes and is impressed with the qualifications of the competitors. Excited about this, she asks the secretary to confirm the job interview for that same day, as she can't wait to hire new employees. After all, the company is breaking a profit record. She looks at the resumes once more and notices that 3 candidates stand out, 2 men and a woman, and says that the 2 boys seem to have more of that experience, but that the woman is equally qualified and says she can't wait to meet them beyond their professional characteristics, because that's what makes a great professional. But before releasing the employee to get in touch with competitors, she asks the secretary to prepare an empathy test, because that is a company that values, in addition to professional qualification, human values. The two talk about how to do this new test. Last time, some unforeseen events happened and the experience was not very positive. The boss then asks that this time the test be more elaborate. In addition to being a qualified person, she is looking for someone who is not arrogant and boastful, but someone capable of putting themselves in someone else's shoes. The businesswoman reveals that she has an idea, and that it will be the perfect test to choose the company's newest employee. The boss guarantees that the secretary will be surprised by what she is planning. Later, the boss pretends to be a woman unable to walk. Using a wheelchair, she asks the first interviewee to help up the sidewalk. But the man, justifying being in a hurry, decides not to help that supposedly disabled woman. The woman reveals that she will also be interviewed. At that moment, the man reveals that it is one more reason not to help her, saying that people like her are usually favored. Even though she insists, the boy refuses to help and leaves her alone on the street. Soon after, the second interviewee arrives and she repeats the strategy. Before anything else, he asks if the woman is going somewhere nearby, and she replies that she will be interviewed at that company. Like the other, he justifies that he's late, and that's why he won't be able to help her at this time. She begs for help, but he shows to be prejudiced and says that a disabled person shouldn't even be on the street looking for a job. And she is alone once more. A few minutes pass, and the businesswoman opens her purse and takes out her cell phone. She dials some numbers and calls her secretary. The businesswoman reveals that she is very disappointed, and that she is considering canceling the interview. She reinforces that she is looking for a professional who needs to be empathetic, and the 2 men who arrived were very rude to her, and that is why she is not convinced to hire either of them. The secretary is surprised, but reminds the boss that hopes are not over yet. There is still one more person to be interviewed who has not arrived yet. This information renews the company owner's hopes, and so she decides to wait a few more minutes for this last competitor. A few minutes later, a woman arrives in a hurry, as she is very late for the interview, but she hears the calls for help from the supposed wheelchair user, and unlike the other 2 men, she decides to help, even at the risk of losing her job. The businesswoman takes the same test and says she's going to do an interview at that company, but the woman doesn't seem to mind and keeps trying to help her up on the sidewalk. She then succeeds and the 2 women enter the company. Upon arriving at the office, the 2 men laugh at that situation and mock the wheelchair user and the competitor who decided to help her. The 2 men are arrogant and say that those 2 women are not qualified to apply for that job. But the boss, already losing her temper, asks what's wrong with them. The 2 men once again show that they are prejudiced and arrogant, saying that a wheelchair user would never be able to compete with their curriculum. The businesswoman continues to pretend to be a competitor and responds that anyone can compete for any job. While the men make fun of the wheelchair user, the woman who will be interviewed is more kind and empathetic. As they spew hatred towards the 2 women, the secretary listens and subtly takes notes on the contestants' behavior. But she also loses her temper and asks the men to behave and to speak more quietly. And she says that soon the owner of the company will arrive and will not like their behavior at all. The businesswoman then asks the woman to help her reach another place in the office, as it is very hot there. Meanwhile, the boys continue to insult the two women, looking more like teenagers in a classroom. After placing the woman a little further away from the men, the boss thanks her for her kindness, and to the surprise of everyone except the secretary, gets up from her chair. The two men get nervous and ask what's going on. The secretary, already knowing who will be the person hired, says that that woman will not be interviewed, and that she is not in a wheelchair. She is actually the boss and owner of that company. The two men are cowards and, instead of admitting that they were wrong, they start to invent justifications to explain the bad behavior they had since they arrived at the company. They say that aggressive behavior does not represent who they are, that they were actually nervous, and that they really need the job, and ask the businesswoman to give them one more chance. But the boss reveals that the curriculum will not be the decisive question for choosing the new employee. She reveals that she took that test because she is looking for an employee who, in addition to being professionally qualified, has the main human values, such as empathy, respect and love for others. These are the pillars of that company, and the two guys prove to be the opposite of what she seeks. The businesswoman then dismisses the two men, and hopes that the experience will be a life lesson for them. Finally, she confirms that the manager position will go to that kind woman. In this way, this businesswoman was able to show that human values are above anything else.